Long Island, New York, Republic Aviation Factory Cafeteria. December 1956. The lunch rush is in full swing, 200 men packed into tables that smell like motor oil and coffee, and the particular sweat that comes from welding aluminum in winter. The noise is constant, laughter, arguments about the Yankees, someone telling the same joke about Eisenhower for the third time this week. In the far corner away from the windows, a man sits alone. He has been sitting alone for 3 months. Every day, same corner, same silence. His lunch tray holds a piece of white bread folded in half, a cup of water, nothing else. Around him, American workers eat meatloaf and mashed potatoes, turkey sandwiches with mayonnaise apple pie that their wives packed that morning. They laugh, they complain, they live. The man in the corner does neither. His name is Klaus Werner, 35 years old, thin in a way that suggests months of not quite eating enough. His hair is going gray too early. His hands when he picks up the folded bread shake slightly. Not from fear, from something deeper. Something that has been shaking inside him since 1944. The workers know who he is. Everyone knows. He is the German, the one from the Luftwaffe, the one who designed fighter planes that shot American boys out of the sky. The one they had to hire because nobody else could solve the wing flutter problem on the F-105 Thunder Chief. The one who works 16-hour days and never speaks unless spoken to and eats like a prisoner, punishing himself for crimes no court ever named. They leave him alone. Not out of respect, out of something closer to discomfort, like having a ghost at the table. Then Frank DeLuca walks over. Frank is 56 years old, factory floor supervisor, 250 pounds of Italian-American stubbornness wrapped in coveralls that have his name stitched over the heart. He is missing his left hand, lost it in a lathe accident in 1945, the day after VE Day. The irony of surviving the war only to lose a hand to a machine tool is not lost on him. He wears the absence like a badge, proof that metal does not care about your politics. Frank carries a plate, 6 strips of bacon, thick cut, perfectly crispy, still steaming. The smell cuts through the cafeteria noise like a memory of Sunday mornings and grandmothers who believed food could heal anything. He drops the plate in front of Klaus Werner. The sound of ceramic hitting formica makes the men at the nearest table go quiet. Eat, Frank says. It is not a request. It is an order from a man who has given orders to 500 workers for 10 years and knows the difference between suggestion and command. Klaus stares at the bacon, his hands already shaking. Shake harder. I cannot, he says. His English is good but heavy with accent. German vowels that still sound like home, even though home is rubble and graves. Frank pulls out a chair, sits down. The cafeteria is watching now. This is unusual. Supervisors do not sit with the German. Supervisors do not sit with anyone. They eat in the office upstairs where there is coffee that does not taste like burned wire. You've been eating bread and water for 3 months, Werner Frank says. Like you are punishing yourself. I am done watching it. Eat the damn bacon. Klaus looks up. His eyes are the color of January sky, gray and wet and full of weather that will not break. I do not deserve American food, he whispers. The cafeteria has gone silent. The kind of silence that happens when men realize they are witnessing something that matters. Something that will be retold. Something that might explain the German who designs their aircraft and eats like a prisoner of war even though the war ended 11 years ago. Frank leans forward. When he speaks, his voice is softer. The voice of a man who has thought about this moment for weeks. Who has watched Klaus Werner walk past the cafeteria line every day, take only bread, sit alone, and has been adding up the cost of that kind of self-imposed starvation. Let me tell you something, Werner. I fought in Italy, 1943. Anzio. Saw a lot of German boys die. Saw a lot of American boys die too. Good kids from Brooklyn and Kansas and Georgia. 18 years old. Died in mud that was not even their own country's mud. You know what I learned? And Klaus does not answer. Cannot answer. His throat has closed around words he has been swallowing for a decade. I learned that dead men all look the same, Frank says. German, American, Italian. When the life goes out, there is no difference. They all just look like somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's father who will never come home. The words land like stones in deep water, heavy, final, true. I killed your brothers, Klaus says. The words come out broken, each one a confession he has been carrying alone. The planes I designed, the Messerschmitt 262, they shot down B-17 SB-24S and American boys who should have lived, who should have married and had children and grown old. I killed them. Frank nods slowly. Yeah, probably. And American bombs killed your family. I read your file, Werner, your wife, your daughter, Stuttgart, March of 1944. So we are even on grief. Question is, what do we do now? Keep hating, keep punishing ourselves, or do we eat some goddamn bacon and try to build something worth building? He pushes the plate closer. The bacon is cooling, grease pooling at the edges. The smell is overwhelming. Not just food, something older, something that speaks to hunger. Klaus has been denying since he set foot on American soil. This is not charity, Frank says. This is not forgiveness. This is breakfast. And you cannot design aircraft on bread and water. So eat. That is an order from your supervisor. Klaus Werner picks up a strip of bacon with both hands. They are still shaking. He lifts it to his mouth. The first bite is slow, tentative, like a man who has forgotten what it means to taste something good. The bacon is salty, smoky, rich with fat and heat and the particular alchemy that happens when pork meets fire. It is everything Klaus has been denying himself. Pleasure, sustenance, permission to be human again. He chews, swallows, and then something inside him breaks. Tears stream down his face. Not quiet tears, the kind that come from deep in the chest. From the place where grief has been locked away because opening that door means drowning. He is crying into bacon. In front of 200 American workers who built bombers during the war and now build fighters for the next war and do not know what to do with a German engineer sobbing over breakfast. Frank does not move, does not offer comfort, just sits, waits, understands that some things have to break before they can be fixed. When Klaus can finally speak, his voice is barely above a whisper. 12 years, he says, since the day they died. I have not let myself feel anything. Not grief, not joy, not hunger, nothing. Because feeling anything meant remembering, and remembering meant drowning. Frank nods. I know. I have been there. Different war, different grief, but the same drowning. He stands up, puts his hand on Klaus's shoulder. The gesture is brief, awkward, but real. Tomorrow, same time you come through that cafeteria line and you order real food, Frank says. That is not a request. That is your supervisor telling you that starving yourself does not honor the dead. It just makes you useless to the living. And we need you not useless. We need you fixing wings so our pilots come home. Understood. Klaus nods. Cannot speak. Can only nod. Frank walks away. The cafeteria noise slowly returns. Men go back to their meatloaf and their jokes and their arguments about baseball. But everything has changed. The German is no longer invisible. The German has been seen. And in being seen has been given permission to be human again. Klaus Werner sits alone with 5.5 strips of bacon remaining on his plate. He eats them slowly. Each bite a small act of resurrection. Each bite permission to rejoin the world of the living. What happened next would change not just this man's life, but the lives of hundreds of men who flew the F-105 Thunder Chief into combat. Because sometimes the enemy does not fall to bullets or bombs. Sometimes they fall to bacon. Sometimes they fall to the simple radical act of being treated like a human being instead of a symbol. And sometimes that is how you win a war that everyone thought was already over. Welcome back. This is the story of Klaus Werner, former Luftwaffe engineer, designer of the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter that terrorized Allied bomber crews in 1944 and 1945. A man who came to America not because he was forgiven, but because he had nowhere else to go. A man who spent 11 years punishing himself for crimes no one ever charged him with. A man who thought he deserved to starve. And this is the story of Frank DeLuca, Italian-American factory supervisor, World War II veteran who lost his left hand the day after victory in Europe. A man who made a promise to a dying Italian farmer in 1944. a promise that would connect him to Klaus Werner in ways neither of them could imagine. This is the story of the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief, the largest single-engine fighter ever built, a nuclear bomber disguised as a fighter jet, a machine designed to carry atomic weapons into Soviet territory at twice the speed of sound, a machine that should have failed, would have failed, except for the German engineer who designed its wings to bring pilots home instead of just destroying targets. But most of all, this is the story of what happens when enemies stop being symbols and start being men, when hatred gives way to bacon, when the past stops defining the future, when America does what America does best, turns the enemy into a neighbor, not through force, not through propaganda, but through the simple, stubborn kindness of one man who refused to let another man starve himself to death in the corner of a cafeteria. Klaus Werner was born in Stuttgart, Germany in 1921, the son of a mathematics professor and a piano teacher. Brilliant with numbers from an early age, the kind of child who could look at a bridge and intuitively understand the stress loads, who could see an airplane and know without calculation whether it would fly or fall. He was 17 when the war started, 19 when the Luftwaffe recruited him. Not as a pilot, as an engineer. They put him at a desk in Munich and told him to make their fighters faster, stronger, deadlier. And he did, because that is what engineers do. They solve problems. They do not ask whether the problem should be solved. They just solve it. By 1944, Klaus Werner was one of the youngest senior engineers at Messerschmitt. He worked on the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, a machine so far ahead of its time that Allied pilots called it the Silver Demon, fast enough that conventional fighters could not catch it, deadly enough that it shot down American bombers by the dozens. Klaus was proud of his work, proud of the elegance of the wing design, proud of the mathematical precision that allowed jet engines to be mounted without tearing the airframe apart, proud that German engineering was proving superior to anything the Allies could produce. He was proud right up until March of 1944. That was when the Allied bombers came to Stuttgart. Klaus was at the factory in Munich, 70 miles away, close enough to see the smoke, not close enough to do anything. His wife Helena was home with their daughter Anna, 8 years old, bright, curious, the kind of child who asks questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? How do airplanes stay up? When will the war end? So Papa can come home. The bombs fell at 2 in the afternoon. 1,000 plane raid, American B-17s and B-24s. The kind of raid that turns a city into a furnace. The kind of raid where survival is geography and luck and nothing else. Helena and Anna were not lucky. Klaus learned about it 3 days later. A telegram. Terse, clinical. Regret to inform you. Killed in action. The language of war that makes death sound like paperwork. He did not cry. Not then. There was too much shock. Too much numbness. Too much sense that reality had become unmoored and was drifting somewhere he could not follow. He went back to work. What else was there to do? The war did not stop for personal grief. The factory did not stop. The Me-262s still needed to be built. Allied bombers still needed to be stopped. So he worked. 16-hour days, 18-hour days. Days that blurred into each other until time became meaningless and work became the only thing that kept him from thinking about what he had lost. By 1945, Germany was collapsing. The factories were rubble. The cities were ash. The armies were ghosts. Klaus surrendered to British forces in April, spent 6 months in a prisoner of war camp. Not because he was dangerous, just because nobody knew what else to do with German engineers who had made machines that killed Allied soldiers. The camp was not brutal. The British treated prisoners according to Geneva Convention rules. There was food, shelter, medical care, but there was also boredom, the slow, grinding tedium of waiting for someone to decide your fate. Klaus spent 6 months staring at wire fences and wondering if Helena and Anna had suffered, if they had known what was coming, if they had been afraid. He hoped they had not been afraid. In late 1945, the Americans came. They were recruiting, Operation Paperclip. The name sounded innocent, almost cheerful, but the reality was cold calculation. America wanted German scientists, German engineers, German expertise, because the war with Germany was over, but the war with the Soviet Union was just beginning. And wars are won by whoever has the best engineers. They offered Klaus a choice: stay in Germany and rebuild, or come to America and build for the country that had bombed his family to death. He chose America, not because he wanted to, because staying in Germany meant living in the ruins, meant walking past the crater where his house had been, meant breathing air that smelled like ash and death, meant being surrounded by survivors who looked at him and saw the engineer who had prolonged the war, who had made the jets that killed their sons and brothers and fathers. In America, at least, he could disappear. In America, he could be nobody, just another displaced person with an accent and a skill set. He arrived in Baltimore in 1947, flat broke, speaking broken English, carrying one suitcase that held 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and a photograph. Helena and Anna, taken in 1942, before the war consumed everything, before the world learned what a 1,000-bomber raid could do to a city. He kept the photograph, not because looking at it brought comfort, because forgetting them would be worse. The Americans put him to work at Martin Aircraft. The company was building the P-6M Seamaster, a massive seaplane, a nuclear bomber that could take off from the ocean, hide from Soviet radar, strike from anywhere. It was ambitious, brilliant, impossible. Klaus worked on the Seamaster for 5 years, designed the water scoop system that allowed a 200,000-pound aircraft to take off from Chesapeake Bay, solved problems that other engineers said could not be solved, made the impossible merely difficult. And the entire time he ate bread and water, lived in a boarding house, spoke to no one, worked, slept, repeated, like a machine that had forgotten it was human. In 1955, the Seamaster program was canceled. Not because the aircraft did not work, it worked beautifully, but the Navy decided it was too expensive, too complex, too much. Missiles were cheaper, submarines were more reliable. The future did not need massive seaplanes. The future needed cold efficiency. Martin laid off 300 workers. Klaus was one of them. He thought about going back to Germany, but there was nothing to go back to. His family was dead. His friends were dead or scattered. The country was divided, half occupied by Americans, half occupied by Soviets. There was no home left. So he applied to Republic Aviation. Long Island. They were building the F-105 Thunder Chief, a fighter bomber, nuclear capable, Mach 2, the kind of aircraft that needed engineers who understood high-speed aerodynamics, engineers who could solve problems that killed test pilots. Republic hired him, not because they liked him, not because they trusted him, because they were desperate. The Thunder Chief was killing test pilots. 3 crashes in 6 months, wing flutter at high speed, structural failure, metal fatigue, problems that were turning a promising aircraft into a death trap. Klaus fixed it, redesigned the wing attachment system, changed the spar geometry, added redundancy, made the aircraft survivable. But he still ate bread and water, still sat alone, still punished himself for being alive when Helena and Anna were not. For 3 months, nobody said anything. The American workers watched him, judged him, whispered about him, but nobody reached out. Nobody offered friendship. Nobody gave him permission to be human again. Until Frank DeLuca brought him bacon. Frank DeLuca was born in Brooklyn in 1900, the son of Italian immigrants who came through Ellis Island with nothing but hope and willingness to work. His father was a mason, built apartment buildings in Manhattan, came home every night covered in brick dust and cement powder. His mother took in laundry, washed other people's clothes in a bathtub, and hung them to dry on lines strung between tenements. Frank grew up knowing what work meant, knowing that survival was a family project, knowing that America gave you opportunity but not guarantees. You had to build your own life. Nobody was going to hand it to you. He got a job at a machine shop when he was 16, learned to read blueprints, learned to operate lathes and mills and drill presses, learned that metal has a language, that if you listen carefully, steel will tell you when it is stressed, when it is about to fail, when it needs to be treated with respect. By 1940, he was a supervisor, 20 men under him, good men, immigrants like him, men who believed in craft, in precision, in doing the job right because your name was on it. Then the war came. Frank enlisted in 1942. Too old for frontline infantry, but young enough for logistics. They sent him to Italy, put him in charge of supply depots, made sure ammunition and food and medical supplies got to the front lines. Boring work, necessary work. Work that did not make you a hero, but kept heroes alive. In 1944, near Anzio, Frank met Giuseppe Romano, an Italian farmer, 70 years old, living in a farmhouse that somehow had not been blown apart yet. Giuseppe fed American soldiers, brought them eggs and bread and wine, refused payment, said it was his duty as a Christian to feed hungry men. One day, German snipers hit the farmhouse. Giuseppe was carrying a basket of bread to American troops. He took 3 rounds in the chest, died in Frank's arms. His last words, spoken in broken English that Frank barely understood, were a request. Promise me, American. Promise you treat prisoners with dignity. Germans, Italians, whoever. They are men, not monsters. Promise me. Frank promised, not because he particularly wanted to, because a dying old man had asked him to, because saying no to a dying man seemed worse than saying yes. 3 months later, Frank lost his left hand. Lathe accident, May 9th, 1945. One day after victory in Europe. The war was over. Everyone was celebrating. Frank was trying to repair a damaged supply truck. The lathe grabbed his sleeve, pulled his hand in. The blade did not care that the war was over. The blade just did what blades do. They saved his life. Could not save his hand. Sent him home with a pension and a Purple Heart that felt like a joke. Wounded by a machine tool. Not exactly a glorious war story, but Frank went back to the machine shop, learned to work with one hand, learned that disability is only limiting if you let it be. By 1950, he was supervising again. By 1955, he was at Republic Aviation, 500 workers, building the F-105 Thunderchief, making sure American pilots had aircraft that would bring them home. And every day he walked past Klaus Werner, sitting alone, eating bread and water, starving himself, punishing himself, looking like every prisoner of war Frank had ever seen, looking like Giuseppe Romano had looked in those final moments, like a man who had given up on living but had not quite figured out how to die. For 3 months, Frank watched, tried to decide if it was his business, tried to decide if a promise made to a dying Italian farmer in 1944 applied to a German engineer in 1956. Tried to decide if kindness was weakness or strength. Finally, he decided. He owed Giuseppe Romano. He owed the old man who died bringing bread to soldiers. He owed the promise. So Frank brought Klaus bacon, 6 strips, perfectly crispy, and permission to be human again. Tomorrow, Klaus Werner will walk through that cafeteria line. He will order eggs and toast and bacon. He will sit with Chuck Anders, a young engineer, who decides that maybe the German is not so bad. He will begin to remember what it means to taste food, to feel hunger, to be alive. But today in this moment, Klaus sits alone with bacon cooling on his plate and tears drying on his face in the first small, fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, he is allowed to stop punishing himself. Maybe America is not the enemy he thought it was. Maybe these American workers are not the monsters propaganda said they were. Maybe bacon is not just food. Maybe it is something closer to grace. Unearned, undeserved, but offered anyway. And maybe that is what makes America different. Not the weapons, not the wealth, not the power, but this, the willingness to feed the enemy, to see the human underneath the uniform, to understand that grief is grief and hunger is hunger, and that bacon in the end is just bacon, unless it is something more. The next morning, Klaus Werner walks into the Republic Aviation cafeteria at 11:53. He has timed this carefully. Lunch rush starts at noon. He wants to be early. Wants to get through the line before the crowd arrives and 200 men watch the German order real food for the first time in 3 months. His hands are shaking. They have been shaking since he woke up at 5 this morning. Since he put on his work clothes and walked the 2 miles from his boarding house to the factory and sat at his drafting table trying to work, but mostly just thinking about bacon and whether yesterday was real or some kind of fever dream brought on by malnutrition. The cafeteria line is short, 3 workers ahead of him. Klaus joins the line, waits. The woman behind the counter is named Dorothy, 60 years old, gray hair and a net. She has been serving food at Republic since 1943. She has seen Klaus walk past her station every day for 3 months carrying only bread. She has seen him get thinner, more hollow, more ghost-like. She has wanted to say something but did not know what to say to a German who clearly did not want to be spoken to. Today, Klaus stops at her station. Eggs, he says. His voice is quiet, scrambled, and toast, white, and bacon. Please. Dorothy stares at him for 3 full seconds. Then her face breaks into a smile that could light a small city. Well, it is about damn time, she says. She loads his plate. 3 eggs, 4 slices of toast, 6 strips of bacon. More than he ordered. You need meat on those bones, honey. You look like a strong wind could knock you over. Klaus takes the tray. His hands are shaking so badly the coffee sloshes in the cup. He does not know where to sit. His corner table feels wrong now, like going back there would be regression. But sitting anywhere else feels like invasion, like claiming space he has not earned. Werner, a voice calls. Over here. Chuck Anders, 25 years old, sandy hair, farm kid from Iowa, mechanical engineer, married 6 months. His wife Beth is pregnant, due in April. Chuck has a face that makes him look younger than he is, open, friendly. The kind of face that has not yet learned to be suspicious. Chuck is sitting with 3 other engineers, Bill Morrison, Pete Sullivan, Tommy Reeves, all in their 30s, all veterans, all men who have been at Republic since before Klaus arrived, all men who have been part of the silence that surrounded the German for 3 months. Klaus walks over, sets his tray down, sits carefully, like a man who does not want to break something fragile. I am Chuck, the young engineer, says. I know you are Klaus. I know you worked on the wing redesign. I know you fixed the flutter problem that killed Jimmy Barnes last year. I do not know why nobody has said thank you yet, so thank you. Klaus looks at him, cannot speak, can only nod. The other men at the table are less welcoming. Bill Morrison stares at his meatloaf. Pete Sullivan drinks coffee and says nothing. Tommy Reeves looks like he wants to be anywhere else. But they do not leave. And that Klaus understands is something. Not acceptance, but not rejection either. Something in between. Something that might, with time, become tolerance. Klaus eats his eggs. They are hot, soft, rich with butter. He eats his toast. It is crispy, sweet with jam. Dorothy put on without asking. He eats his bacon. It is exactly like yesterday. Salt and smoke and permission to be alive. Halfway through the meal, Chuck starts talking about baseball. The Yankees. Mickey Mantle. Whether they can win the pennant again this year. Klaus does not understand baseball. Does not understand why grown men care so deeply about other men hitting a ball with a stick. But he listens, nods occasionally, lets the sound of Chuck's enthusiasm wash over him like sunlight. For the first time in 11 years, Klaus Werner feels almost human. The feeling lasts until 2:15 that afternoon. Klaus returns to his drafting table. He works in the engineering section. 40 desks arranged in rows. Windows on one side overlooking the factory floor where the F-105BS are being assembled. The noise is constant, riveting, welding, the high-pitched whine of power tools, the shouting of supervisors coordinating hundreds of workers building the most complex aircraft Republic has ever attempted. Klaus's desk is in the back corner, away from windows, away from supervisors, where he prefers to be, invisible. Today his desk is covered in grease, motor oil, thick, black, poured over his blueprints, soaking into the paper, ruining weeks of work, calculations for the new wing spar attachment system, stress analysis diagrams, wind tunnel data, all of it destroyed, deliberately, maliciously. There is a note, written on company letterhead, folded and placed on top of the grease puddle. Go back to Germany, Nazi. Klaus stands very still. He does not touch the grease, does not touch the note, just stares. His mind is trying to process what this means. Someone did this. Someone walked to his desk during lunch. Someone poured motor oil on months of work. Someone wants him gone. His first instinct is to clean it up. Say nothing. Accept it as deserved. He killed Americans. Someone killing his work seems fair, balanced, justice of a sort. But then he thinks about Frank DeLuca, About bacon, about Chuck Anders saying thank you, about Dorothy giving him extra food, about the fragile sense that maybe he is allowed to be human again. And he realizes that accepting this means accepting that he will never be more than the German, the enemy, the Nazi, that no amount of bacon or kindness will ever change what he is in their eyes. So Klaus walks to Frank DeLuca's office. Frank is on the phone, arguing with someone about delivery schedules. He sees Klaus in the doorway, sees his face, hangs up without saying goodbye. What happened? It is not a question. It is a command. Tell me what happened so I can fix it. Klaus describes the grease, the note, the destroyed blueprints. His voice is flat, factual, like an engineer describing a technical problem. Component failure, cause unknown. Recommend investigation. Frank's face goes very still, the kind of still that happens before a storm. He stands up, walks past Klaus, heads to the engineering section. Klaus follows. The grease is still there, drying now, sticky. The blueprints are ruined. Frank picks up the note, reads it. His jaw clenches so hard Klaus can hear teeth grinding. Frank turns to the 40 engineers working at their desks, raises his voice. Everybody stop. Right now, stop. The drafting room goes quiet. Pencils stop moving. Conversations die mid-sentence. 40 men look at Frank DeLuca holding a piece of paper that is shaking slightly in his one hand. Somebody here poured motor oil on Werner's desk, destroyed his work, left a note telling him to go back to Germany. I want to know who. Silence. The kind that happens when everyone is afraid to breathe too loudly. I will ask once more, who did this? More silence. But this time Frank watches. He is good at watching, good at reading men. He sees Bill Morrison's eyes flick away, sees Pete Sullivan shift in his chair, sees Tommy Reeves stare very intently at his blueprints like they contain the secrets of the universe. Frank walks over to their desks. 3 men, all in their mid-30s, all World War II veterans, all men who have been at Republic longer than Klaus, all men who Frank has known for years. Morrison, Sullivan, Reeves, my office, now. The 3 men follow. Klaus stays in the drafting room. He does not want to hear this, does not want to witness whatever happens next. But 20 minutes later, the 3 men return. They walk to Klaus's desk. Their faces are ashen. Frank is behind them, watching. Bill Morrison steps forward first. He is the oldest, 37, served in the Pacific, lost 2 friends at Iwo Jima. His cousin died in a German POW camp, Dachau. Starvation and disease and cruelty that no human should endure. Morrison looks at Klaus, his jaw is clenched, his hands are fists. When he speaks, the words come out like broken glass. I am sorry. For the grease, for the note. It was not right. Klaus stands slowly. He understands what this costs Morrison, understands the grief and rage underneath those words. Understands that Morrison's cousin died because of men like Klaus. Maybe not Klaus specifically, but men in German uniforms. Men who believed in following orders. Men who built systems that turned humans into numbers. I am sorry for your cousin, Klaus says quietly. Truly, I am sorry for all of it. For every man who died in those camps. For every family destroyed. I cannot undo it. I cannot make it right. But I am sorry. Morrison does not take Klaus's extended hand, just nods once. Tight, then turns and walks away. Pete Sullivan steps forward next. Younger, 32, flew B-24s over Europe, 23 missions. Shot down over France on mission 24. Bailed out, French resistance hid him for 6 weeks. Got him back to England. He knows what it means to be helped by the enemy, to owe your life to people you were supposed to kill. Sullivan looks at Klaus. His eyes are wet. My brother Jimmy flew B-17 SAW, shot down over Frankfurt, January 1945. Spent 6 months in Stalag Luft I-3. Came home 30 pounds lighter. Nightmares for 2 years. But he came home. Sullivan pauses, takes a breath. Jimmy told me something before he died. Cancer. 2 years ago, he said the German guards were just men. Scared men doing a job they did not choose. He said some of them gave prisoners their own food when rations ran low. He said some of them were kind. He said hating all Germans because of what some Germans did was like hating all Americans because some Americans dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. He said the war made monsters out of everybody. But it did not erase the men underneath. Sullivan extends his hand. Klaus takes it. They shake, firmly, like men who understand that war is complicated and grief is simple, and forgiveness is the hardest work anyone ever does. "Welcome to Republic," Klaus Sullivan says. His voice breaks slightly. "I'm sorry it took us 3 months to say that." Tommy Reeves does not speak, just shakes Klaus's hand, nods, walks back to his desk. Frank DeLuca watches this, then raises his voice to address the entire drafting room. "Let me make something clear. Klaus Werner is an engineer at this company. He is designing systems that will keep our pilots alive. You do not have to like him. You do not have to invite him to your homes, but you will treat him with professional respect. Anyone who has a problem with that can pack their toolbox and leave. We have 500 applications on file. I will replace you by tomorrow." He pauses, looks at each man in the room. "We are building the F-105 Thunder, Chief, the most advanced fighter bomber in the world. It will carry nuclear weapons into Soviet territory at Mach 2. Our pilots will fly it knowing that if something goes wrong, they die. They die fast. They die alone. They die a long way from home. Our job is to make sure they do not die. Our job is to bring them home. And right now, the man best equipped to do that job is Klaus Werner. So you can hate him for what he did in the war. Or you can work with him to save American lives. Your choice." Frank walks back to his office. The drafting room stays silent for another minute. Then slowly the sound returns. Pencils on paper, quiet conversations, the hum of men returning to work. Chuck Anders walks over to Klaus's desk, looks at the grease-covered blueprints. "I can help you redraft these," Chuck says. "I have got clean copies of the stress tables in my files. We can rebuild this by Friday." Klaus looks at him, at this young man from Iowa who has no reason to help a German engineer but is offering anyway. "Why?" Klaus asks. "Why do you help me?" Chuck shrugs. "Because my dad taught me something. He said the measure of a man is not what he did in his worst moments. It is what he does after. He said everybody gets a second chance, even Germans." He grins. "Besides, I heard you fixed the wing flutter that killed 3 test pilots last year. Anyone who can do that deserves a clean desk." They work together for the rest of the afternoon, redrafting blueprints, recalculating stress loads, rebuilding what was destroyed. By 6 that evening, most of the work is restored. Klaus's hands are cramping. His eyes are tired. But something inside him has shifted, lightened. He is not alone anymore. Not entirely. Chuck Anders is helping him. Pete Sullivan said welcome. Even Bill Morrison apologized. It is not friendship, not yet, but it is something. A crack in the wall, light coming through. The next morning, Chuck arrives at Klaus's desk carrying 2 paper bags. "My wife Beth packed extra breakfast," Chuck says. "Figured you could use some real food." He unpacks the bags. 2 sandwiches, eggs and bacon and cheese on thick white bread. 2 apples. 2 thermoses of coffee. It is more food than Klaus usually eats in a day. "I cannot," Klaus starts. "You can and you will," Chuck interrupts. "Beth is pregnant. She is nesting. That means she is cooking for an army. If you do not eat this, I will have to eat both and I will explode. You would be doing me a favor." Klaus takes the sandwich. Bites. It is still warm. The eggs are squashed. The bacon is crispy. The cheese is melted perfectly. It tastes like someone cares whether he lives or dies. "Thank you," Klaus says quietly. They eat together, in silence mostly. But it is a comfortable silence, the kind that happens between men who are becoming colleagues. Maybe friends, maybe something more than enemies. This becomes routine. Every morning, Chuck brings 2 breakfasts. Every morning they eat together. Sometimes they talk about work. Sometimes Chuck talks about Beth and the baby coming in April, and his hopes that it is a boy, but honestly he will be happy with healthy. Sometimes Klaus talks about Stuttgart before the war, about his wife Helena, who played piano, about his daughter Anna, who wanted to be a dancer. The other engineers notice. Some disapprove, some shrug, some start joining them. By February, there are 5 men eating breakfast at Klaus's desk every morning. By March, there are 10. It becomes the unofficial engineering morning meeting, where problems are discussed, solutions proposed, bacon sandwiches consumed. Frank DeLuca watches this transformation, says nothing, but he smiles sometimes. Small, satisfied smiles, like a man who planted a seed and is watching it grow. The F-105 Thunder Chief is fighting them. The aircraft is magnificent on paper. 50 feet long, 35-foot wingspan. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney J75 engine that produces 26,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. Top speed Mach 2.1. Combat radius 800 miles. Capable of carrying a single nuclear bomb or 6,000 pounds of conventional ordnance. It is the future. Fast, deadly, unstoppable. Except it keeps trying to kill test pilots. The problem is wing flutter. At high speed above Mach 1.8, the wings vibrate. Not minor vibration. Violent oscillation, the kind that tears metal apart. 3 test aircraft have crashed. 3 pilots have died. The Air Force is losing patience. Republic is losing money. The board is discussing whether to cancel the entire program. Klaus has been working on this problem for 6 months. He has redesigned the wing spar 3 times, changed the attachment geometry twice, added stiffeners, removed stiffeners, tested different materials, aluminum alloys, titanium inserts, steel reinforcement. Nothing works. The flutter persists. The wings keep trying to tear themselves off the fuselage at high speed. In March 1957, Bob Harriman refuses to fly the next test. Bob is the chief test pilot, 29 years old, naval aviator, flew F-9F Panthers off carriers during Korea, survived 2 crashes, 3 emergency landings. He knows risk, he accepts risk, but he does not accept suicide. I am not getting in that aircraft until someone explains to me why the wings will not fall off. Bob tells Frank, I have got a wife and a baby daughter at home. I am not dying because we are in a hurry. Frank calls a meeting. Klaus, Bob, Chuck Anders, Bill Morrison, Pete Sullivan, 6 senior engineers. They gather in a conference room with blackboards covering every wall, blueprints spread across tables. Models of the F-105 wing sections sitting on shelves. Talk to me, Werner, Frank says. What is causing the flutter? Klaus stands at the blackboard, picks up chalk. His hands are not shaking anymore. 3 months of eating real food have steadied him. 3 months of Chuck's friendship have reminded him how to be human. 3 months of building something instead of destroying something have given him purpose. He draws wing cross-section, airflow lines, stress vectors. As he draws, he talks. His accent is still thick, but his confidence is absolute. This is what he knows. This is what he is good at. This is why America wanted him. The problem is not the wing structure itself, Klaus says. The structure is strong enough. The problem is resonance. At Mach 2, the airflow creates pressure waves. These waves hit the wing at specific frequency. The wing has a natural frequency. When these 2 frequencies match, resonance occurs. The wing amplifies the vibration instead of dampening it, like a bridge in wind, like Tacoma Narrows in 1940. He turns to face the room. We cannot change the airflow. We cannot change the natural frequency of the wing without complete redesign, which would take 2 years. But we can change the damping. We can absorb the energy before resonance builds. How? Bob asks. Klaus draws more, shows internal wing structure, proposes adding a system of hydraulic dampers, small pistons filled with fluid, positioned at critical stress points. They will absorb vibration energy, convert it to heat, prevent resonance from building to destructive levels. It will add weight, Klaus says, approximately 200 pounds per wing. It will reduce top speed by 0.05 Mach, but it will prevent catastrophic failure. It will bring you home. The room is silent, men studying his drawings, checking his math, looking for flaws. Chuck Anders speaks first. The math works. I verified the stress calculations. The damping coefficient is sufficient to handle the resonance frequencies we have measured. It should work. How long to build and test? Frank asks. 6 weeks, Klaus says, if we work fast. If we have budget, if the board approves. The board will approve, Frank says grimly, because the alternative is telling the Air Force we cannot deliver a working aircraft, which means Republic goes bankrupt. which means 2,000 workers lose their jobs. So yes, the board will approve. He looks at Bob. If Werner installs these dampers, will you fly it? Bob looks at Klaus. Really looks. Like he is trying to see past the German accent in the Luftwaffe past, in the designer of the ME-262, trying to see the engineer. The man. The person who now spends 18-hour days trying to solve a problem that has killed 3 men. If Werner says it will work, Bob says slowly, then I will fly it. Because I have watched him for 6 months. I have seen him eat lunch alone. I have seen him get grease poured on his desk. I have seen him apologize to men who hate him. And I have seen him keep working, keep trying, keep caring about whether American pilots live or die. So yes, if he says it will work, I trust him. Klaus feels something crack in his chest. Trust. An American test pilot trusts him. Trusts a German who designed machines that killed Americans. Trusts him with his life. I will not let you die, Klaus says quietly. I promise. I will not let you die. For the next 6 weeks, Klaus works like a man possessed. 18-hour days, 7 days a week. He sleeps at the factory, in the back room where they store drafting supplies. 4 hours a night on a cot Chuck brought from home. He eats breakfast sandwiches that Chuck delivers. Drinks coffee that Dorothy from the cafeteria brings in thermoses. Loses himself in calculations and metal and the absolute determination to solve this problem. To bring Bob Harriman home. To prove that a German can save American lives. Chuck works beside him. So does Pete Sullivan. Even Bill Morrison stays late some nights, helping, checking calculations, running to the machine shop to fabricate test components. These men who 6 months ago would not speak to the German are now working beside him, trusting him, believing in him. In late April 1957, the modified F-105 is ready. New hydraulic dampers installed in both wings. Every connection triple-checked. Every calculation verified. It is as ready as they can make it. Bob Harriman climbs into the cockpit at dawn. The sky is pearl gray, no clouds, perfect conditions for a test flight. Klaus stands on the tarmac watching. His hands are shaking again. Not from hunger, from fear. If he is wrong, Bob dies. If the dampers fail, Bob dies. If the calculations are off by even a small margin, Bob dies. Chuck Anders stands beside Klaus, puts a hand on his shoulder. It will work, Chuck says quietly. I checked your math. Morrison checked your math. Sullivan checked your math. It will work. Klaus cannot speak, can only watch as the F-105's engine spools up. 26,000 pounds of thrust igniting. The sound is overwhelming, physical, like being inside thunder. Bob taxis to the runway, accelerates. The F-105 lifts off, climbs, turns, heads east over Long Island Sound. For 20 minutes, Klaus watches the sky, waiting, praying to a God he stopped believing in when Helena and Anna died. Please, please let this work. Please let me bring him home. The radio crackles, Bob's voice, calm, professional, but with an edge of excitement, approaching Mach 2, no flutter detected, no vibration. Dampers are working. I repeat, dampers are working. This thing flies like a dream. Klaus's knees buckle. Chuck catches him. He holds him up. Around them, engineers and mechanics are cheering, shouting, slapping each other on the back. The Thunder Chief works. The problem is solved. Republic is saved. Bob lands 20 minutes later, climbs out of the cockpit, walks straight to Klaus, and hugs him, right there on the tarmac in front of 200 workers. Hugs the German engineer who saved his life. Thank you, Bob says. His voice is rough. You brought me home. Thank you. Klaus cannot answer, can only hold on to this American pilot and sob into his flight suit. Sob for Helena and Anna. Sob for all the pilots he killed with the Me-262. Sob for the 3 test pilots who died before he fixed the problem. Sob for everything he has lost and everything he has found, and the impossible grace of being forgiven by the people he hurt most. Frank DeLuca watches from his office window, smiles, thinks about Giuseppe Romano, about the promise he made in Italy 13 years ago, about treating enemies with dignity. About bacon and second chances and the strange alchemy that turns hatred into something closer to brotherhood. The Thunder Chief works. Klaus Werner fixed it, and in fixing it, fixed something in himself, something that had been broken since 1944, something that Bacon started to heal and trust finished healing. He is not the enemy anymore. He is Klaus, engineer, colleague, friend, and that makes all the difference. Bob Harriman goes home that night and cannot sleep. His wife Elizabeth is in bed beside him. Their daughter Sarah is 18 months old, sleeping in the nursery down the hall. Bob can hear her breathing through the baby monitor, soft, steady, innocent. A sound that reminds him why he tests aircraft, why he risks his life, why he trusts a German engineer with calculations that determine whether he lives or dies. But tonight, trust feels complicated. Elizabeth stirs, reaches for him in the dark. "You have been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours," she says. What is wrong? Bob does not answer immediately. How does he explain what he is feeling? Relief that the test flight worked. Gratitude that Klaus's dampers prevented the wings from tearing off at Mach 2. Shame that he hugged a German on the tarmac while somewhere his brother Tommy is still dead. Still buried in a military cemetery in France. Still 23 years old forever because a German fighter shot down his B-17 over Hamburg. "I hugged him," Bob says finally. Klaus Werner, the German, after the test flight. "I hugged him." Elizabeth props herself up on one elbow. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, Bob can see her face. Patient, understanding. The face of a woman who has learned to navigate her husband's complicated relationship with the war. "You hugged the man who saved your life," Elizabeth says gently. "That seems reasonable. He designed the planes that killed Tommy. Did he personally shoot down Tommy's B-17? Bob has heard this question before. From Elizabeth. From himself. From the part of his mind that knows the difference between individual guilt and collective responsibility. But knowing the difference does not make the grief easier. No, Bob admits. Klaus was designing jets. Tommy was shot down by a conventional fighter. Different aircraft, different engineer, different everything. So Klaus did not kill your brother, no, but you are angry at him anyway." Yes, Elizabeth is quiet for a moment. Then she says something Bob has been avoiding thinking about for 6 months. "Tommy wrote you that letter before his last mission. Do you remember what it said?" Bob remembers. The letter is in a box in the closet, along with Tommy's Purple Heart and his service photograph and the telegram that said, "Regret to inform you." Bob has not read the letter in 5 years. Reading it hurts too much. But he remembers every word. "He said not to hate the Germans," Bob whispers. "He said they were just men like us, scared, trying to survive. He said to hate the war, not the warriors." Elizabeth takes his hand. Her fingers are warm, alive, real. So maybe hugging Klaus Werner is what Tommy would have wanted. Maybe forgiving the engineer who tried to bring you home is how you honor your brother. Not by hating, by living. By letting the German fix your aircraft so you come home to your daughter. Bob closes his eyes, feels tears hot on his face. Elizabeth holds him. They lie together in the dark. Outside Long Island is quiet. Inside, Bob Harriman makes peace with something he has been carrying for 14 years. Tomorrow he will buy Klaus Werner a cup of coffee. Tomorrow he will say thank you properly. Tomorrow he will start treating the German like a colleague instead of a ghost. Tomorrow he will try to be the kind of man Tommy wanted him to be. Saturday morning, Chuck Anders finds Klaus at his drafting table. Klaus works most Saturdays, has nowhere else to be, no family, no hobbies, no life outside the factory. Work is what he knows. Work is safe. "You ever learn to drive?" Chuck asks. Klaus looks up. Chuck is wearing civilian clothes. Blue jeans, white t-shirt, leather jacket. He looks young, American, optimistic in a way Klaus has forgotten how to be. "I drove in Germany," Klaus says. "Before the war. Volkswagen. But here, no license. I walk to work. 2 miles, every day. 2 miles," Chuck shakes his head. "In winter, Jesus, Klaus. Come on. We are fixing that right now." He pulls Klaus out of his chair, out of the factory, into the parking lot where a 1954 Chevy Bel Air sits gleaming in the May sunshine. Blue and white, chrome bumpers that reflect the sky. White wall tires, the kind of car that looks like optimism turned into metal. This is yours, Klaus asks. This is mine. And today you are learning to drive it. Chuck takes Klaus to an empty parking lot behind a shuttered warehouse. Half a mile of cracked asphalt. No obstacles, no other cars. Perfect for someone who has not driven in 12 years. Klaus sits in the driver's seat. His hands on the steering wheel feel strange, foreign. The last time he drove it was 1944, Stuttgart, before the bombs, before Helena and Anna died, before everything ended. The Chevy is nothing like the Volkswagen he remembers. That car was small, utilitarian, built for efficiency. This American car is enormous, excessive. The dashboard has more chrome than necessary. The seats are leather, soft, comfortable. There is a radio, a heater, a cigarette lighter, cup holders. Why is it so much, Klaus asks, not criticism? Genuine confusion. In Germany, cars are transportation. This car is something else, something he does not have words for. Chuck grins, because we can. That is the whole point, Klaus. In America, we do not just survive, we thrive. We add chrome and radio and comfortable seats because life should have some damn joy in it. Because we fought a war and won, and now we get to enjoy the peace. Because excess is not a sin, it is a celebration. He reaches over, turns on the radio. Elvis Presley, Hound Dog. The sound fills the car, loud, brash, alive. This is America, Chuck says. We bottle joy. We chrome it, we turn it up loud. Now drive. Klaus drives, slowly at first. The Chevy feels huge, unwieldy, like steering a boat. But Chuck is patient, encouraging, laughing when Klaus stalls the engine, cheering when Klaus successfully makes a turn without hitting the curb. They drive for 2 hours, around and around the empty parking lot, Klaus getting more comfortable, more confident, starting to feel something he has not felt in years. Not quite joy, but close, something lighter, something that might with time become happiness. After 2 hours, Chuck says they have earned lunch. He drives them to a diner, small place, chrome exterior, red vinyl booths, the smell of frying burgers and coffee. Very American, very 1957. They sit at the counter. Chuck orders 2 burgers, 2 fries, 2 Cokes. Klaus has never had Coca-Cola. In Germany, it was impossible to get. During the war, it was American. The enemy's drink. After the war, it was expensive. A luxury. Klaus has been living on bread and water for so long that the idea of drinking something for pleasure instead of survival feels foreign. The waitress brings 2 bottles, frosted, condensation running down the glass. She pours them over ice. The sound of liquid hitting ice cubes, the fizz, the particular brown color that somehow looks like summer. Chuck raises his glass to Klaus Werner, engineer, American in training, man who is finally learning that life is supposed to include Coca-Cola. Klaus picks up his glass, sips carefully. The first taste is overwhelming, sweet, more sweet than anything he has tasted in years. Carbonated, the bubbles sharp on his tongue. Cold, refreshing, perfect. And then something happens that Klaus does not expect. The taste reminds him of something, a memory. Anna, his daughter, 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in Stuttgart. This was 1943, before the bombs. Klaus had brought home a small bar of chocolate. Hard to get, expensive. But Anna's birthday was coming, and he wanted to give her something special. Anna had tasted the chocolate. Her eyes had gone wide. "Papa," she said, "this is happiness. This is what happiness tastes like." Klaus had laughed, kissed her forehead, promised that after the war they would have all the chocolate she wanted, all the sweet things, all the junk. He never got to keep that promise. Now sitting in an American diner drinking Coca-Cola, Klaus understands something. This sweetness, this cold, carbonated joy, this is what Anna would have loved. This is the chocolate promise he never kept. This is happiness in a glass. Tears stream down his face. Chuck sees, does not look away, does not make a joke, just waits. "My daughter," Klaus says quietly. "Anna. She loves sweet things. I could not give her enough. Not during the war, not after. I never got to keep my promises to her. He drinks more Coca-Cola, each sip a small act of remembrance. Each sip permission to feel joy even though Anna never got to. Each sip forgiveness for being alive when she is not. She would have loved this, Klaus whispers. Yeah, Chuck says softly. She would have. They sit together. Two men, one American, one German, drinking Coca-Cola and carrying grief, and somehow in this diner on Long Island in 1957, finding a way to be friends. After lunch, Chuck drives Klaus back to the factory. But instead of dropping him at the gate, Chuck keeps driving, takes Klaus to his house. Small Cape Cod in Levittown. White siding, green shutters, postage stamp lawn. The kind of house that represents every American dream about ownership and stability in building a life. Beth Anders is in the front yard, 7 months pregnant, glowing with that particular energy that pregnant women have. She waves when she sees Chuck's Chevy pull up. Chuck brought the German home, she calls out. Good. I made too much pot roast again. You boys better be hungry. Klaus freezes. He has not been inside an American home. Not in 10 years of living in America. He has lived in boarding houses, barracks, factory dormitories, spaces that are temporary, impersonal. He has not been invited into someone's life, into their home, into the sacred space where families happen. I should not, Klaus starts. You should and you will. Chuck says, Beth has been cooking for 3 days. If you do not eat some of it, she will make me eat all of it, and I will die. You would be saving my life, which seems fair since I am teaching you to drive. Inside the house smells like Sunday. Pot roast, potatoes, carrots, onions, bread baking. The smell of a home where people care about feeding each other, where meals are events, where food is love made visible. Beth Anders sets the table. 3 places. She talks while she works. About the baby coming in August. About names they are considering. About how Chuck wants a boy but she thinks it is a girl. About the nursery they are painting. About hopes and fears and the ordinary, beautiful, mundane details of building a family. Klaus listens, eats. The pot roast is tender, rich, flavored with herbs he cannot name. The potatoes are soft, buttery, perfect. It is the best meal he has had since Helena died, since the last time someone cooked for him with love instead of duty. After dinner, Chuck shows Klaus the nursery. Small room. Walls painted pale yellow. A crib that Chuck built himself. A rocking chair. A shelf with stuffed animals. A mobile with stars and moons hanging above where the baby will sleep. Beth is scared, Chuck says quietly. We both are. What if something goes wrong? What if we are not good parents? What if the world is too dangerous to bring a child into? Klaus thinks about Anna, about all the what ifs. What if the war had ended sooner? What if the bombs had fallen somewhere else? What if he had taken his family out of Stuttgart when he had the chance? What ifs are infinite, useless, devastating. The world is always dangerous, Klaus says, always uncertain. But you bring children into it anyway, because hope is stronger than fear, because love is worth the risk, because the alternative is to let fear win, and fear has already won too much. Chuck looks at him, really looks, like he is seeing Klaus for the first time. Not the German, not the enemy, just a man who lost everything and somehow still believes in hope. Thank you, Chuck says, for saying that, for being here, for not giving up. Klaus does not trust his voice, can only nod. That night, walking back to his boarding house, Klaus thinks about Anna, about Helena, about the life he lost. But for the first time in 13 years, he also thinks about the life he might still build. About Chuck and Beth and their baby coming in August. About Bob Harriman trusting him. About Frank DeLuca bringing him bacon. About Dorothy giving him extra food. About the men at Republic who are slowly becoming colleagues. Friends. About Coca-Cola and Chrome and driving lessons and pot roast and the ordinary, extraordinary kindness of Americans who could hate him but choose not to. Maybe Klaus thinks maybe America is not just a place. Maybe it is a choice to feed the enemy, a choice to teach him to drive, a choice to invite him to dinner, a choice to treat the past as past and the present as possibility. Maybe that is what makes America exceptional. Not the weapons or the wealth or the power, but this, the willingness to turn enemies into neighbors, the stubbornness to believe that people can change, the radical, optimistic, foolish, beautiful idea that bacon and Coca-Cola and pot roast can heal wounds that bullets cannot. Klaus buys his first Coca-Cola the next day, keeps it on his drafting table, drinks it slowly, each sip a reminder. Anna would have loved this. Helena would have smiled at his enjoyment. They are gone, but he is here. And being here means honoring them by living, by allowing himself joy, by accepting kindness, by becoming American, not through force, but through friendship. The engineers notice. Bill Morrison sees the Coca-Cola, raises an eyebrow. You are drinking American now, he says. Not quite a question, not quite approval, but not disapproval either. Something softer, something that might be acceptance. Klaus drinks American, Klaus says, and eats American, and learns to drive American cars, and tries to be American engineer who brings pilots home. Is this acceptable? Morrison thinks. Then nods once. Yeah, that is acceptable. He walks away. But the next day he brings Klaus a Coca-Cola, sets it on Klaus's desk without comment, without apology. Just a bottle, an offering, a peace treaty written in carbonated sugar water. Klaus drinks it, understands what it means. Morrison's cousin died in Dachau. Morrison has every right to hate Germans forever. But he brought Klaus a Coke, which means something has shifted, something fundamental. The wall is cracking, light is coming through. By summer, the engineering section has a new tradition. Every Friday afternoon after the week's work is done, they gather in the break room, drink Coca-Colas, eat sandwiches, talk about aircraft and baseball and families and the ordinary things that men talk about when they are not at war. Klaus is part of these gatherings, not quite the center, but not the outsider either. He tells stories about Stuttgart before the war, about the Messerschmitt factory, about the strange parallel evolution of American and German aircraft design, about how both countries were solving the same problems with slightly different mathematics and arriving at surprisingly similar answers. The Americans listen, ask questions, realize that Klaus is not defending the Nazis, not defending the war, just describing engineering, the pure technical challenge of making machines fly faster, higher, longer, the challenge that knows no nationality. That belongs to anyone who loves aircraft and mathematics and the particular beauty of solving impossible problems. Bob Harriman joins these Friday gatherings. Always sits next to Klaus sometimes. They talk about the F-105, about upcoming test flights, about modifications Klaus is proposing, about whether the dampers need adjustment, about the delicate balance between speed and safety. One Friday, Bob brings a photograph, black and white, creased. His brother Tommy in uniform, B-17 crew, 9 men standing in front of their bomber. Young, smiling, confident. That is Tommy, Bob says quietly. Second from the left, he was 23, died over Hamburg, January 1945. Klaus looks at the photograph. At this young American who died because of a war Klaus helped fight. At this brother Bob has been grieving for 12 years. At this ghost that has haunted their relationship since Klaus arrived at Republic. I am sorry, Klaus says. The words are inadequate, insufficient, but they are all he has. I know, Bob says. I know you are. And Tommy would not want me to hate you forever. He would want me to work with you, to trust you, to let you bring me home. So that is what I am doing. He puts the photograph away, looks at Klaus directly. You saved my life last month, when you fixed the wing flutter. You could have let the problem stay unfixed. Let me die. Balance the scales for your family and my brother. But you did not. You worked 18-hour days to solve it. You cared whether I lived or died. That matters more than the past. Klaus cannot speak, can only nod. Accept the forgiveness he does not deserve, but is being offered anyway. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. If you served during the Cold War era, or if your father worked in aviation during the 1950s and 1960s, drop a comment below. Did you ever work alongside former enemy soldiers? How did that feel? Because this story is about more than machines. It is about what happens when enemies become colleagues. And eventually, brothers, I promise you by the end of this story, you will understand why Klaus Werner kept a Coca-Cola on his desk for the rest of his life. Why he named his first American-born son Frank. Why he cried at Chuck Anders' wedding. Why he worked at Republic until the company died. Why he never went back to Germany. Why he became more American than some Americans. Because America is not blood, it is not birthplace. It is choice. It is bacon and Coca-Cola and driving lessons and pot roast and men who decide that forgiveness is stronger than hatred, that the future matters more than the past, that enemies are just friends who have not had Coca-Cola together yet. In August 1957, Beth Anders goes into labor, 36 hours, difficult, dangerous. The baby is breech, the doctors are worried, Chuck is terrified, pacing the hospital waiting room, chain smoking, praying to a God he has not talked to since his father's funeral. Klaus and Bob wait with him. They do not have to be there. This is not their family, not their crisis, but they are there anyway, because that is what brothers do. At 3 in the morning, a nurse comes out. Her face is tired, serious. She looks at Chuck. You have a son. He is small, 4 pounds. He is in an incubator, but he is breathing, fighting. Beth is exhausted but stable. You can see them in a few minutes. Chuck collapses into a chair, sobbing, relief and terror, and overwhelming love for a 4-pound human he has not met yet. Klaus puts a hand on his shoulder, says nothing. Sometimes there are no words. Sometimes there is just presence. Just being there when the world is too big and too scary and too beautiful to face alone. They named the baby Thomas, Tommy, after Bob's brother, after the B-17 pilot who died over Hamburg, after the ghost that has haunted Bob for 12 years. It is Beth's idea, a way of honoring the past while building the future, a way of saying that death is not the end, that names carry on, that love persists. When Bob hears the name, he breaks down, cries in the hospital corridor. Klaus and Chuck on either side of him. 3 men who were strangers 8 months ago, who are now brothers, who have learned that family is not just blood, it is bacon, it is Coca-Cola, it is waiting together at 3 in the morning for a 4-pound baby to breathe. Tommy Anders survives, grows, thrives. By his first birthday, he is healthy, normal, perfect. Chuck brings him to the factory sometimes. The engineers pass him around. This tiny human who represents hope, who represents the future they are building, who represents the idea that even in a world full of nuclear weapons, in Cold War tension, in enemies lurking everywhere, babies still get born. Families still happen. Life still wins. Klaus holds Tommy carefully. This child named after an American killed by Germans. This child who exists because Chuck chose to be kind to a German. This child who will grow up in a world where Klaus's engineering keeps his father's friends alive. The circle closes. The past connects to the present. The grief transforms into something else. Not quite healing, but close. Close enough. Outside the factory, the 105 Thunder Chiefs are rolling off the production line. 50 aircraft so far. 200 more ordered. Each one equipped with Klaus's wing dampers. Each one designed to bring pilots home. Each one a promise that Klaus Werner is keeping to Bob Harriman, to Chuck Anders, to Tommy Anders, to everyone who trusted a German to care about American lives. The Cold War is escalating. Soviet bombers are flying. American bombers are flying. The world is one mistake away from nuclear annihilation. But inside Republic Aviation, men are building aircraft and eating bacon and drinking Coca-Cola and teaching each other to drive and waiting together in hospitals and choosing every day to be brothers instead of enemies. And that, Klaus thinks, is how you win a war. Not with better weapons, not with more hatred, but with better friendships, with more trust, with the stubborn, optimistic, foolish, beautiful decision to feed your enemy breakfast and see what happens next. What happens next is this. A defector arrives from the Soviet Union. His name is Viktor Petrov. He is a test pilot. He flew against the Americans in Korea. He helped design Soviet bombers. He is the enemy, and he specifically requested to work with the German engineer who designs for survival instead of just destruction. Viktor Petrov is coming to Republic Aviation, and everything Klaus has learned about being American is about to be tested. Because if Americans can forgive a German, can they also forgive a Russian soon? Klaus, who was forgiven, now extend that same forgiveness to someone else. Can bacon and Coca-Cola and driving lessons work twice? We are about to find out.